The air is thick with incense, the rumble of imperial chariots, and the silent tension of an empire, still raw from conquest. For the first time in recorded history, a ruler, who had united every warring state under one crown, stands ready to climb the most sacred mountain in the Chinese world, not as a conqueror, but as a man about to claim his mandate from heaven itself. This is the story of Qin Shi Huang. Fengshan sacrifices, the single most important ritual in ancient Chinese imperial history, a carefully staged act of political theater and spiritual declaration that shaped 2 millennia of rule. Today, we pull back the curtain on this legendary ascent, using only strict, verified historical records, from Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian, modern archaeological findings, and mainstream academic consensus, to reveal the ambition, conflict, and cosmic ambition behind the first emperor's journey to the top of the world. Let us start with the stakes. By 219 BCE, Qin Shi Huang had been emperor of China for just 3 years. He had destroyed the 6 warring states, ended centuries of bloodshed, standardized writing, currency, weights and measures, and built a network of imperial roads that tied his vast realm together. But military victory and legalist reforms were not enough. In the eyes of the Eastern elites, especially the learned Confucian scholars of Qi and Lu, the cultural heart of old China, Qin was a brutal Western upstart, a ruler without sacred legitimacy. For generations, Mount Tai had been seen as the bridge between earth and heaven, the only mountain where a true king could report his success to the gods. The ritual of Fengshan was not some vague tradition. It was a non-negotiable stamp of approval from heaven itself. Without it, Qin Shi Huang was just a warlord who had won a war. With it, he would become the son of heaven, a ruler, divinely ordained to govern all under heaven. This is why he left his capital at Xianyang, marched thousands of troops and officials east, and embarked on a pilgrimage that would redefine what it meant to be an emperor. Before he even set foot on Mount Tai, Shi Huang laid the groundwork with a calculated pre-ritual at Yishan, a smaller mountain nearby. There he erected a stone monument inscribed with small seal script, praising the Qin's unification and declaring his universal rule. This was no random monument. It was a direct message to the Qi and Lu scholars. I have already earned the right to stand before heaven. Do not doubt my merit. The message was clear. When he finally arrived at the foot of Mount Tai, he summoned more than 70 of the most respected Confucian scholars and ritual experts to advise him on the proper Fengshan ceremony. What happened next reveals the clash between old tradition and new imperial power. The scholars offered conflicting, impractical advice. They insisted the emperor ride in a cart wrapped in straw to avoid harming the mountain's plants and rocks, perform simple sweeping rituals, and use primitive mats made from grain stalks. To Qin Shi Huang, these suggestions were absurd, divisive, and designed to undermine his authority. He did not just disagree, he dismissed the scholars entirely, banishing them from the mountain and refusing to let any of them join the ascent. This was a bold political move. By rejecting their outdated rituals, he was telling the Eastern elite that he would define the new order, not be confined by their old rules. And so the first emperor ordered a new road, carved directly up the southern slope of Mount Tai, a path fit for an emperor. Accompanied by his closest ministers, generals, and religious officials, he climbed to the summit, where a circular altar had been built, according to Qin's own sacred traditions, drawing heavily from the emperor's traditional worship of the supreme god at Yang. The Feng ritual, the act of worshipping heaven, was performed in total secrecy. Sima Qian writes that the details were hidden from the world, a deliberate choice to preserve the ritual's sacred power and keep control of its narrative. We know from archaeological digs on Mount Tai's summit in 2023 that a rammed earth altar, measuring 42 meters long and 18 meters wide, matches the exact location described in ancient texts. This is where Qin Shi Huang offered sacrifices, burned offerings, to send a smoke rising to heaven, and formally announced that he had unified the realm and fulfilled his divine duty. This was not just prayer. It was a legal, cosmic declaration. Heaven has recognized my rule. The entire empire was now bound to obey, not just by military force, but by divine right. After completing the Feng ritual at the summit, Qin Shi Huang descended the northern slope of Mount Tai to perform the Shan ritual at nearby Liangfu Mountain. The Shan ritual was dedicated to earth, the counterpart to heaven, completing the sacred bond between the emperor, the sky, and the land he ruled. At Liangfu, he built a square altar, offered sacrifices to the spirits of the earth, and buried sacred jade and text tablets as a permanent record of his covenant. Once again, the ceremony followed Qin ritual, not the old Confucian traditions. Every choice was intentional. By combining heaven and earth worship in this way, Huang created a complete, unified imperial theology that centered himself as the only bridge between the mortal and divine worlds. To make his divine claim permanent, Huang erected another massive stone inscription at the top of Mount Tai, drafted by his prime minister Li Si, written in the standardized small seal script that had been imposed across the empire. The inscription praised the emperor's virtue, his unification of the realm, his establishment of law and order, and his receipt of the heavenly mandate. Only fragments of this stone survive today, but its message echoed across every corner of China. The Qin was not just a dynasty, it was a divine institution. This stone was more than a monument. It was a political weapon, a spiritual proclamation, and a cultural statement all in one. It told every subject, every rebel, every scholar, that resistance to Qin was resistance to heaven itself. Even a sudden storm that struck as the emperor descended the mountain could not break the power of the moment. Huang simply sheltered under a large pine tree, then later granted the tree the noble title, 5 great officials, turning a minor natural event into another sign of divine favor. We cannot understand the Fengshan ritual without grasping its revolutionary political purpose. Before Qin Shi, Huang Fengshan was a vague legendary ritual attributed to ancient sage kings with no verified historical record. No ruler had ever performed it on the scale Qin did, and none had used it to legitimize a fully centralized universal empire. The ritual solved the Qin's biggest political problem: how to turn a conquered collection of states into a single nation loyal to one emperor. For the eastern states that had hated Qin's rule, the Fengshan ritual was a powerful psychological blow. It said that their own sacred traditions now belonged to the Qin emperor. For the rest of the empire, it provided a unifying spiritual identity that transcended old regional loyalties. Legalist laws controlled the body, but Fengshan controlled the soul. This combination of brute force and divine legitimacy is what allowed the Qin system to survive even after the dynasty fell, and become the foundation for every Chinese empire that followed. Mainstream historians agree that Qin Shi Huang's Fengshan was not an act of blind piety. It was a masterclass in political strategy. He took a local Eastern religious tradition, stripped it of its old elite control, remade it in the Qin image, and turned it into the ultimate symbol of imperial authority. For over 2,000 years, every legitimate Chinese emperor would aspire to perform the Fengshan ritual at Mount Tai. Emperors of the Han Tang and Song dynasties all followed in Qin Shi Huang's footsteps, proving that he had created the permanent gold standard for cosmic legitimacy. Without this 219 BCE ascent, the entire idea of the Chinese emperor as the son of heaven would have lacked its most sacred visible expression. What makes this story so gripping is its tension between tradition and revolution, secrecy and spectacle, human ambition and divine pretense. Qin Shi Huang was a man who refused to be limited by the past. He did not ask for permission to rule heaven's realm. He took it. The climb up Mount Tai was short, but its impact was eternal. In one day, on one mountain, a conqueror became a god-king, a warring world became an empire, and a ritual became the backbone of Chinese political thought. This is not just ancient history. It is the moment when China as we know it was spiritually and politically forged. Every detail we have explored today comes from strict historical accuracy. Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian, the Book of Fengshan, modern archaeological evidence from Mount Tai, and peer-reviewed academic research. We have ignored myths, folk tales, and speculative fiction, focusing only on what scholars accept as factual. The Fengshan ritual was not a fairy tale. It was a calculated, high-stakes event that changed the course of civilization. If you enjoyed this journey into ancient China, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more epic history. See you next time.